What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to Red Top Reports. I am your host, Joe Gallagher, and it's Friday. So you know what that means. It's the JQ with B. So Dr. Willie Mahoney, thank you for coming on.
Thank you, Joe. Thanks for having me.
It's always a pleasure. So in case you haven't seen this episode before, this is part of the program. This is where we take your questions from all of our viewers and we offer them to Dr. Willie Mahoney and see what your takes are based from a theological perspective. So Dr. Mahoney, our first question, let's start with this one. Are exorcisms still performed today? And if so, how does an individual find such help?
Very good question. So, of course, there's like the major rite of exorcism, and for that, they are still performed today. You need the permission of a bishop because he is the chief priest in the diocese, so he can delegate that authority to one of his priests. Typically, each diocese should have an exorcist. You don't always know who that person is. It's probably better you don't. And it was the question if you needed an exorcism. Was that part of the question?
I just put it down.
Oh, sorry.
Gosh, let's see here.
But it seemed like there were two parts to that.
Are they still performed today? And if so, how does an individual find such help?
Okay. So they are still performed today.
That's the last time I'm reading it, by the way.
This time I got it.
Okay.
So this time I got it. Yes, they're still performed today. If you think you're in need of help and that you should go to the diocese, you should go ask your priest, start there, and then look around. Unfortunately, the way things are now, there are some less than perfect leaders sitting in bishoprics.
That's very charitable of you, Doctor.
Yes. And so not every diocese necessarily has the exorcist they should have, nor would every bishop necessarily sign off on that, especially if they don't believe it.
Right.
So in that case, if you really have some manifestations, there's something that needs to be looked into, start with your own diocese. And then if that's not the case, look for a diocese that does deal with that. And then I would suggest going there.
Gotcha.
In the meantime, there is the major rite of exorcism, which needs the bishop's permission. But then there's deliverance as well. And you don't have to use the actual rite of exorcism, the major rite of exorcism, in which case any priest can do deliverance prayers over you. So you can start there depending on what the manifestations are.
Yeah.
I mean, because the devil, demons work on different levels.
Yeah, obsession, depression,
exactly.
Possession.
Exactly. They're always bothering all of us with temptation and whatever else. So when they see their opportunities, if it becomes a little more serious, you think there's something more going on there. But it's not, let's say it's not majorly affecting your life. You can start with a priest, find a priest who will do deliverance prayers over you because he does have that power.
Yeah.
You can start there.
Just make sure that priest doesn't offer counseling at Franciscan University. And then, sorry, that might have been too bad.
No,
that's harsh. But that's true. It ties into the thing with the exorcism.
Sure.
Some of those priests take serious advantage of those situations.
Yeah. So you do that. And then if it's more serious, if you're like manifestations where you're levitating or cursing in Latin or something, then you should start
probably call a bishop.
Yeah, then you want to check, start with your priest and then just go up the ladder. And if the bishop's non-responsive, I would look for another diocese to have that dealt with.
I have to say, good on whoever asked that question, because that takes I think a real humility and spiritual awareness to at least consider that as a possibility in one's life.
It is, and the church can a good exorcist or even a priest who does deliverance type ministries, he can assess that what's going on there. The devil's not under every rock, but he's certainly under some. So that's for the priest to figure out. That's.
Yeah,
pretty much what you want to do there.
On that happy note, let's jump to the second question. I actually like this one, and if we don't get to the third one, we can always ask the third one next, JQ with B. I guess I should probably read it instead of trying to memorize it, right?
So in answer to that question, sorry, you have to read it.
Get out, cut me some slack, man. Alrighty, so why are so many young men today seeming so effeminate? Bro.
Yes.
That's heavy.
There's so many factors to that.
Yeah.
There's so many factors to that.
Well, it also gives the assumption that there are a lot of effeminate men.
I would say there are.
Yes.
I mean, I think that's pretty obvious.
Premise is true, therefore justification.
I'll give like a bigger answer to the question rather than to get into all the minutia and detail. I mean, obviously they're bombarded with bad images, bad music, bad stories, I mean, you're just bombarded with evil.
Nature.
So yeah, the world, the flesh, and the devil, right? Those are the three things, and they often work together. So the world and the devil, and getting out horrible messaging, and then you got your flesh to contend with. So you mix all those and turn up the heat really hard, and it's going to do damage.
I don't know why I said nature. I meant nurture.
Nurture.
Influence. Oh.
I didn't actually know what you meant, so I just nodded and
just
smiled. I was like, sure, nature,
right. Let me
whatever.
answer the questions.
But I didn't want to contradict you on your own show, so
it's okay.
I let
Please,
it go.
Always.
Yeah, no. But I would say, like, because of all of these things, they're not virtuous, and they're not growing in virtue. They're practicing a lot of vices. So they're going to grow in vice, right? Virtue simply is the habit of doing good, and vice is the habit of doing evil. So you're going to grow in a virtue or vice. And the word virtue, is related to the word vir, which means man. Virtue is manly. So when you're virtuous, the cardinal virtues, prudence, fortitude, temperance, justice, and everything related to those are the moral virtues. You also have the theological virtues instilled at your baptism, because God is the direct object. So that's faith, hope, and charity. The moral virtues and the theological virtues work together. And when you grow in perfecting them and you grow in virtue, you become more manly. When you grow in vice, you're becoming less manly.
Therefore,
you're becoming, I mean, in some senses, effeminate. Sure, we can say that. There are definitely aspects of that. But you're just becoming more evil, actually. And that can have, it's not necessarily, women aren't evil, obviously.
Right, yeah.
And them growing in virtue, being manly, like they grow in the same virtues. I mean, we're the same as far as the moral law goes. We're equal before God. We're judged by the same moral law. That's all true. We have different roles. Okay. And it'll play out differently. So prudence for a father versus prudence for a mother, that's going to play out differently depending on the circumstances. But basically, men now, younger men and even older men, they're so bombarded with all the world, the flesh, and the devil, and they've given themselves over to so many vices and grown in those vices that they've extinguished virtue, and so by definition, they're not manly. So that's what's going on. You have a lot of guys who aren't willing to fight. They're so used to pampering themselves and pampering their bodies. And, there's millions of sexual sins. I mean, pornography is rampant on the internet.
It's number one. It's
number one. And they're just giving into that pleasure. But when you do that, of course, it's a sin. But when you give into those types of sins over and over and over, you're becoming soft. You're becoming really soft. Because chastity, the virtue of chastity, as the word suggests, kastigos, is you castigate your body, you beat it into submission. And that is manly.
Absolutely.
Because it's the hardest battle to fight. St. Augustine talks about that. That is the hardest battle to fight, because that is in your own flesh. But if you can conquer that, you're strong. You can conquer all kinds of other vices.
I was watching a video and doing some reading up on withdrawal symptoms from opioid addicts. And this ties in, I promise. It was so interesting. So the withdrawal symptoms, are so unbearable because the receptors that are consumed or always excited or inhibited, depending on the ones in the brain, have to do with canceling feelings of pain in order to increase experience of sensory pleasure. And so when those stimulants or those inhibitors are done, the body that was once used to never feeling pain because the connections to the brain saying ow, ow, ow have been shut off for so long, every single experience of discomfort is agony for somebody experiencing withdrawals. And most especially right after they go on Narcan, when they overdose, apparently it's just horrendous. And talk about a perfect worldly example of the spiritual life with virtue, when you're embracing such vice and you just constantly sell yourself to it. You're constantly embracing, you're a slave to it. The moment you even try to push back a little bit, that is unbearable because it's a spiritual discomfort. It's an intellectual discomfort on top of the physical discomfort. And I just think that it's so amazing that on the temporal plane, it wonderfully mirrors the supernatural.
Well, of course, because there's an interaction there, because we are a psychosomatic union. That is the nature of the human being. We're body and soul. So there's the spiritual aspect, but there's the body aspect as well. So let's just stay with the chastity. If you're giving yourself over to lust all the time, spiritually that's destroying you, but it's also hurting you physically because you're so used to the dopamine and everything else that you make yourself very weak, even physically. You can't take a temptation of lust. You have to give into it, and you become a slave. And the devil's got you because you become his slave because you can't beat it anymore. And well, I mean, you can technically, but it becomes very difficult to beat. So you're really a slave, and that's why Jesus tells us, if the Son sets you free, you are free indeed. And every time you fall, and go to confession, start again, work hard toward that. He sets you free from that. He sets you free from that slavery. Now, maybe one thing is how to combat these things. That's an important question.
Yes, and if it's okay, I think that's what I would like to talk about for our exclusive episodes for our Patreon viewers.
Okay.
Alrighty, well, Dr. Mahoney, thank you so much for coming on. Alrighty, guys, if you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to like, comment, subscribe to Red Top Report's YouTube or Rumble channels. Follow us on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter. And again, please be sure to send this to your friends. If you are not a supporter of us through Patreon, please be sure to do that. We're only asking for $7.50 a month. If you want to do $750 too, that's fine by me. But you get exclusive access to special content. So thank you so much for watching this episode of Red Top Report, and we'll catch you next time. Run into the box, run it, check it.